Welcome to the Group Dentistry Now Show, the voice of the DSO industry. Kim Larson and Bill Newman talk to industry leaders about their challenges, successes, and the future of group dentistry. Visit groupdentistrynow.com for more DSO analysis, news, and events. Looking for a job or have a job to fill? Visit joindso.com. We hope you enjoy today's show.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the Group Dentistry Now Show. I am Bill Newman, and as always, I'd love to thank my listeners for listening in, whether it's Google or Spotify or iTunes, or whether you happen to be watching us on YouTube or somehow you find us on groupdentistrynow.com. We appreciate listeners, viewers. Without you, we wouldn't have a show. And of course, without great guests, we wouldn't have you as an audience. So next guest up, you may have seen him at various DSO meetings. Saw him at the Greater New York meeting last year, which is the last time we saw each other in person. Dr. Marc Faber, he is the founder of Edge Dental Mgt. Thanks for being here, Marc.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Very excited.
Yeah, this is good stuff. So, and you know, it's pretty cool because Marc's model is what I think is relatively different in the industry, and Marc can probably talk to this in greater detail. So he actually lives in New Jersey, but Edge Dental Mgt, all the practices are actually in New York. He has 7 practices right now, but he really focuses on underperforming dental offices. Those are the acquisitions, and then he transforms them. So maybe we can even talk about some of those transformations, because you had a really cool LinkedIn post recently about a practice that you had that I think was a 2-op practice that now is 17 chairs. Does that sound right?
Well, yep, that is correct.
So how do you go from 2 to 17? So that's probably a podcast unto itself. So talk a little bit about your background. I'd love to just, you're a graduate of New York University College of Dentistry, but maybe talk a little bit about your background, how you wanted to become a dentist, and then why you wanted to start a DSO.
So firstly, my father was a dentist. So I don't say born into it, but I saw dentistry my whole life. Saw how hard my father worked and saw the benefits of it, and what's also not so good about it. Falling asleep Friday nights or whenever after a long week of work. But yeah, every child's dream is to kind of be like his father. So early, when I was younger, I wanted to be a dentist, but when it came time to it in college, when I was thinking about what I wanted to do, dentistry seemed like a good option as opposed to going to medical school. Happened to be a very good decision at the time, because my friends who are doctors don't have the same opportunities that I have right now. But that's kind of how I ended up in dental school as opposed to medical school. My goal was never to have a DSO, and the truth is that no one was even talking about DSOs when I was in dental school. My goal was actually to have one really good practice. My first year out of residency, I worked with my father. He had 2 practices, one in Midtown on 57th and 6th Avenue, and another practice in Brooklyn. And in my first year working, I didn't make enough money working by him to support my family. So I already was looking, and I found a practice actually in upstate New York, and I offered my father to come along with me. He wasn't interested, and then I bought my own practice in Monroe, New York, back in 2012, and I had the guts to do it about a year out of residency to go into ownership.
Yeah, you don't hear that happen often, not that quickly.
Correct. But I guess I had having my father at that point and his team as a backbone to help support me and help guide me on certain decisions was actually very comforting. But that time that I worked by my father was also amazing, because I learned a lot of good things of how patient management, how to treat employees, and the like. But I also learned a lot of things that I didn't like about his practice, and that he wasn't willing to change, and stuff that I was willing to do. So it gave me a kind of a little bit of real world experience that I was able to kind of enact on really quickly. So Yeah, so a year a year out of residency, I bought a practice that, oh Lord, I didn't even, I couldn't even verify their numbers. The tax return was all over the place. The place was a mess. I mean, the walls were pink and purple. I can't even tell you how crazy this practice was that I bought. But the location was amazing because there were more dentists on my father's floor on 57th Street than were in this entire town. But the population there was massive. I'm talking about a very fast growing Hasidic community, having each family having 10, 12 kids. And they knew that as long as I had an office in that area with so many people, I would be successful. And that was very right.
That's great. So that was 2012.
That's correct.
And so then when did you decide to make the move to add another location? And when you did that, was that like, hey, I want to be a DSO, or no, hey, I just need to, I want another location? Talk about that.
So I actually was in my first, so I bought that practice, and I guess it's been 10 years, so I could say how much it is. I bought that practice for $237,000, which was, it wasn't cheap, but it wasn't a lot of money. But from our calculations, it was less than what it cost to build a practice from scratch.
Okay.
And you had a patient flow, and and the location was correct. So a year later, I was out of space. My first year, we did about $800,000. We expanded. We went from 3 chairs to 8 chairs. I made every mistake in the world on the construction. I'm paying for it today still, but we'll fix that eventually. But by 2014, had already maybe tripled this practice, whatever it was. And by the time we finished the construction, I was really poised to really grow then, because now I had an 8-chair practice, a new facility. Granted, it was a Medicaid office, but it didn't matter because there was just so many people over there. At that same time, when I finished construction, side note, my father got sick, and his practices faltered. He had had some dementia and some other issues that he's still battling today. So a lot of responsibility was put on my shoulders because my parents weren't financially ready for retirement. So I took on, I'm like, all right, I gotta now build a big business to support not only just my family, but my parents as well. So that was the motivation to go ahead and build a business. However, it was to build a business that wasn't based on myself. My father's whole business was built around him. I came from the standpoint saying, hey, I needed to build a business that wasn't dependent on me, so I wouldn't be in the same situation my father was at a later point. So, I guess my motivation to have multiple locations or more locations, or to diversify, was not to get a better EBITDA or any of that stuff. Was actually just from the pure simple fact of not having a business that's built around myself.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So so that's really interesting. So what was the time frame here? This is a couple years later, so 2014.
Yeah, this is around 2014, and then every decision I kind of made afterwards was with that mindset. My brother came along. My brother was finishing up residency at the time, and I know I needed a partner to help me with financially with my parents, but also with growing. Now I had to grow a bit. We want to the plan was to grow a business together, and we had a reason for it. So we were very much aligned to work together. So in 2015, we bought that second office, the one that you mentioned in the LinkedIn post. I bought that. We bought that practice.
Pine Bush.
Yep, we bought that practice to make space for my brother, because I didn't know if there was enough revenue to support both of our families.
So 2 operatories at the time.
2 operatories at a time, and it was. We're talking this was. I bought this practice for nothing. We're talking like $55,000, and to get there, I'm driving past farms and horses, and it was a bit of a ride from where my first location was. About 30 minutes farther for me, and it took a little time to grow that, but soon after that, and then every year after that, from 2015, we bought another practice, and as we went along, we put together systems, and we built our team, and got more doctors and training, and we made a ton of mistakes along the way. hiring the wrong doctors, hiring, the wrong managers, but we worked the kinks out, and slowly, we started getting a nice formula. Um, Also, when my brother started, we can get this afterwards. But one of the things is digital dentistry. This is when it came into play back in 2015.
Okay. Yeah. We'll definitely make sure we touch on that. I've got a couple questions related to that. So really, you talked a little bit about a formula. And one thing that I alluded to earlier was underperforming practices. So you talked a little bit about, the first two, just by, the amount that you paid. The first one was not inexpensive, especially for the time. I mean, it wasn't expensive, but from a cost standpoint, but you saw, I guess, opportunity there, right? So did you look at the practice and say, wow, okay, this is a bargain, but I can,
Correct.
I have a vision.
Correct. So the first practice, I had no data points. I never a production report. I just had like collections, barely, to work off. But in the second practice, I had some data points to work off of, but not much. I mean, the doctor was doing maybe $200,000 a year, so he wasn't doing much of anything. But I knew there was a bunch of patients coming in. There was no hygiene there, so I knew that just showing up and doing a little bit of dental work, that I would, probably double or triple him.
Okay.
He was, when we got there, we knew that this doctor was well liked by the specialist, because when we came in there, I got fruit basket after gift, Ranger tickets. You can't imagine how this guy referred so many patients out to other doctors that they were sending him so many gifts. We didn't get that many gifts after we were there, but slowly we built that business up really, really nicely.
That's great. And so are pretty much all your practices in upstate New York, the seven that you have?
Yeah, they're all about 20 minutes from each other. Every 20 minutes you'll hit another one. I guess the farthest drive between them is probably like an hour plus, not much more. But we could hit them all in a day.
And are they all acquisitions? Are they any de novos, or all acquisitions?
They're all acquisitions, but I would say they have a de novo touch to them, because we're buying these undervalued practices, meaning that these are very often older doctors who have not kept up to date with anything, unfortunately. Very often I'm having they still have dark rooms. Very often there's not practice management software. There, obviously there's no digital X-rays. Very often they don't have hygienists. There's no efficiencies in these offices. And very quickly, by putting some of these efficiencies in, we know that we could take a practice that was doing X and make it do a lot more very quickly. So a practice that's doing $400,000 or less, we know we could probably double or get to $1 million in our first year there, which we've done a couple of times now.
That's great. So let's touch a little bit on digital dentistry. You mentioned that earlier. So going from an underperforming practice to digital dentistry. Talk a little bit about the why there.
So the why. All right, so the why. So the issue was initially in our first office, which was a Medicaid, heavy office. We took an impression for a crown. It would come back 2 weeks later. If the patient showed up, then it took 45 minutes to get the crown to be seated properly. It just didn't make any sense to me. For the amount of money that the lower reimbursement rate that we were getting from Medicaid, it wasn't worth our time. So there got to be a better way. So I started looking into from the advice of my Shine rep, I started looking into different forms of digital scanning. At that time, he suggested using Trios. And we started scanning back in 2015, scanning for crowns. And it was fantastic, because crowns now were coming back in 2 days as opposed to 2 weeks, and they were fitting. After just scanning for like a month or two, we're like, why are we sending to a lab? Let's be our own lab. So we went ahead, kind of at the same time as we bought that second practice, we bought a mill as well. And we worked on training a few of our staff members or team members to design, because doctors should be doing what doctors are good at, which is prepping teeth. You don't need a DDS to design a crown or mill a crown. And we had tremendous success with this, doing, crowns in the same day, doing even scheduling for production or working on production, which was doing even a root canal and post and crown in the same day, was also tremendous. We called Medicaid up at the time, or DentaQuest, whoever it was, and asked them, can we even bill for this? Can we bill all these 3 procedure codes at the same time? They said no. And we're like, I don't know, it didn't sit right with us. We were reading all our manuals and whatnot. I mean, these procedures were completed. There was no exclusions for this. So we went ahead and we did it anyway. And when they paid it out. They didn't, and we haven't had a problem in 6 years, or 7 years now. But what's it called? But working like that, when you're able to speed up the process, you don't need as many patients in a day to be productive. And it sets the systems and the foundation for our business, or for our doctors, to produce really well, not have to see so many patients, and be very happy at the end of your day.
So you talked about digital dentistry. Now, you also mentioned this a little earlier in the conversation. I mean, you went from 1 to 2 and started to, take these underperforming practices, and they started to explode with growth. What type of systems did you put in place? You said, now we need to put systems in place. So what did you start off with? You said some didn't even have practice management software.
Right. So we obviously had to put in, before we even step into an office, even an office number 3, which was Middletown, we needed, we had our practice management had to be set up. We needed a scanner, okay, an intraoral camera, isolite. Those are probably the 4 biggies. Digital X-rays also. I mean, those are the 5 big ones that you need to just to be able to maintain and keep the practice afloat. But you have to understand, we're talking about when we look at these production reports from these doctors, we know whether they're underdiagnosing. We see how many full mouth X-rays they're taking. Very often they're not taking any X-rays. They'll have 1,000 prophies or 1,500 prophies, but they've taken only 20 FMXs in the year. Or they've done 4 quadrants of scaling and root planing the entire year. Or they've done no root, they referred out all the root canals, and they referred out all their extractions. There's so much low-hanging fruit on these practices that a practice that's down at $400,000 is really closer to $1 million if you're actually diagnosing and treatment planning and treating the patients that are already there, which leads to you don't have to market. I do zero marketing, because very often the offices that I'm buying they have enough patients to support it.
So that's a great point. So you're really just treatment planning and then actually getting the patient acceptance, right? Versus going out and trying to get more butts in the seats, right? More patients. So you're not really worried about that. You know that the business is there. It's just a matter of diagnosing and treatment planning and getting the patients to accept.
Correct. And it's very easy. So when I said beforehand that we're kind of like a de novo, is because we buy these practices. We don't want the selling doctors there. We want them to go. We don't want them around at all, actually. And we bring in our own doctors, whether they're new or not, and we allow them to diagnose properly. You take a digital picture. I mean, I don't want to get clinical here on your podcast, but you take a digital picture.
We have a couple of dentists that listen.
I know. You take a digital picture of a tooth and you show them on a big screen, and you show them, hey, there's a crack in your tooth right over here. And, you should probably get a crown on this. You don't have to be a dentist to see that. And having the old dentist there, it would be a hindrance. And it's very easy for the patient to say, all right, why did my other dentist say this? Well, because he didn't see this. And that mindset and being able to educate the patient to make the better decision for themselves allows these practices to grow very, very quickly. Which leads to my next problem, is that these practices are small practices. That's how I take a 2-chair practice and I'm out of space before you know it, or a 4-chair practice, I'm out of space and I have to expand.
So you mentioned something that's interesting. You said, hey, we don't want the dentist that was there initially to stay. That is pretty much counter to what I think a lot of the DSO models are. We want you to stay 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is, right? So do you find that dentist that you want to put in place first, or do you find the practice first? And then if so, where do you find your dentist that you'd like to have in place?
So, I mean, at this point now we have enough we have enough offices where we're kind of always grooming dentists to move to an next location. But either way, whether it's somebody from within our system that we have or somebody new, if we buy, we're not buying hundreds of offices at a time, we're buying 1 or 2, we'll be able to support that new dentist that's there.
Okay.
Me and my partners, or we'll have enough clinical guidance, whether in person or on the phone or on our text groups or whatever, to make sure that everything is being, is meeting our standards. But yes, it is very much counterintuitive because I guess as a dentist-run organization, we're not reliant on the selling dentist. We don't really we care, but we want them to we're buying their practice. We're going to take really good care of their patients, but we don't need them to stick around as opposed to a lot of the other organizations that are out there. And this is why it's a little more challenging what we do, but it's also a lot of fun.
Well, and to your point, there are dentists that want to retire. Like, they don't want to stick around, right? So there are those dentists that want to exit. There's some that you talk to that are like, oh, I don't really want to stay for 2, but like, I'm ready to go now. So you could probably, it benefits you to find those dentists that are looking.
Well, the other telling point is that when I find these practices, I'm not like competing with anybody. None of the DSOs are bidding on these. Like, I have the reverse problem than everybody else. I find too many of these. I have to pick the right ones to go after.
That's a good problem. So other technologies, anything else? You talked a little bit about Isolite but I mean, if there's any, I would say any newer technologies that you see that have been really interesting that maybe you've adopted in the past couple of years, or anything on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, well, we're doing a whole bunch of 3D printing right now.
Okay.
I think we're a beta tester for Sprint Ray. I got some, John Cox over there is an old friend now. But we're 3D printing, night guards and surgical guides and models. A lot of models, a lot of our aesthetic cases were. So this is also for all the clinical people out there. We're scanning on our CEREC. We're doing a digital design. We're doing a digital design, wax up.
Yep.
Then we're 3D printing it, so we have the right contours. Then we're rescanning that and using that as our biocopy to copy the case in order to make a really nice aesthetic case. So these aesthetic cases that we're doing that are, veneers or crowns or big cases, 4, 6, 10 units. They're the 3D printing has gotten so good that the contours are so clear on the print that that our cases have just been coming out unbelievably, like really like better than a private lab, like a high-end private lab, I would say.
Wow. So 3D printing's at the top of your list.
Oh yeah, without a question. Obviously some of this other stuff, we're also doing some 3D printing to restore hybrids, where we could print out our PMMAs, for our temporary hybrids, when we do the all-on 4 or all-on 6 cases. That's also very, very cost effective, but also a nice little tool. And I feel like as time goes on, 3D printing is going to probably take everything over. I think, and everyone knows it. It's not like I'm saying anything that's not known here, but we're very big on the milling right now. But I do see that 3D printing is going to be the future in my mind.
You know, it's and like you mentioned, Sprint Ray, there are a couple others out there. I mean, it seems like you know, the opportunity to get in early and really get those skills refined is gonna keep you ahead of the competition, so to speak.
Yeah, but it's not just it's not about being ahead of the competition here. It's about doing what's best for the patient. You know, you're able to, and it's also what makes it easier for your doctor, for your team. You know, the simpler the process, the simpler the systems, and the easier it is to get, you know, case acceptance, the easier it is to
Right.
complete cases. And they look, you know, whether, no matter what anybody says, when you change somebody's life by changing their smile, and you do it very, you know, nonchalantly, like, this wasn't so hard, this is very simple, and they're gonna tell their friends. They don't have to tell anyone, they're gonna smile and their friends are gonna see it, and that's it. And there's no better advertisement than that.
That's pretty rewarding. So talk to me as we kind of wind things down. I've got a couple of the crystal ball questions. So tell me a little bit about what the future of your group looks like in the next couple of years. I mean, you can kind of continue with this model of, you talked about having a plethora of underperforming practices that are out there. So you gonna continue on there? Is anything different you may do?
I'm not sure yet. I mean, eventually we'll come to a point where we're not going to buy these anymore, but right now it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, for the people that are listening and not watching the video, he's been smiling the whole time. So it does seem like you're having fun, which is great.
That's why I'm always smiling, because I'm always happy. But it's no, it's finding opportunities where people didn't think there was an opportunity. You know, it's maybe it's being innovative or creative, or just finding the path of least resistance. Whatever way you want to call it. That's what we've done so far. And whether we're going to continue with that, I don't know. We don't. We have the ability to choose whichever way we want to go. We may go ahead and buy bigger offices. We may just continue buying smaller offices. But the key is that the most important thing is that we're focused on developing our doctors, working with them, creating opportunities for them, and giving them the you know, the support that they need to be better clinicians. That's a lot of. I mean, we spend probably more time on that than probably anything, making sure that our doctors are really strong. Where one thing that we're doing this year, that's, you know, we built in 2021 we opened up 2 offices. Again, we built out 2 offices that we originally purchased a bunch of years ago, and then made them much larger. We took a 2-chair office, a 17-chair office, and a 3-chair office to a 15-chair office, which was also a lot of fun. But we also, at that same time, we built an in-house lab. We built space to do our CEREC. You know, we have in this office I'm in right now, downstairs, we have 3 mills. We have 2 smaller mills that could, you know, that could mill out up to 3 units. But we do inlays, onlays, veneers, all that good stuff. And then we have a bigger mill called the MCX5 mill that we can mill out a roundhouse bridge if we need to. Cuts out of a puck. And just from a standpoint, from an efficiency standpoint, but also from an EBITDA standpoint, the lab is worth a lot of money. Just on single unit crowns and small bridges, it's probably worth 3% EBITDA if you do it correctly. And then as you go on to do those bigger cases, you know, with out of the puck, maybe worth another 1% EBITDA or so. And now what's exciting for 2022 is that we're working on building a hybrid lab for ourselves, because we're doing a lot of those cases. And I think that's also going to translate to some real EBITDA numbers for ourselves. So I think that's something that a lot of offices don't value, is being able to have control of your lab work.
Do you think that you're going to see more and more of that? You talked about the 3D printing, which probably makes it even a bit easier to control. But I mean, or do you still see, is that the future? Or do you think that is just some practices aren't well suited for that?
I don't know. I really don't. It really depends on the on the will of the group and what they're and what they're thinking. You know, who how many times do you want to be dependent on an outside lab to, oh, did you send it in the mail? Did it come, waiting on that to deliver, where, hey, it's in your system. You're able to have control of the entire process, and when this is going to be done. And if it's not going to be done, or if it gets done incorrectly or something breaks, you can fix it really quickly.
From the patient experience perspective, I mean, it's
unparalleled.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last question for you. This has been really
Okay.
interesting. Really good stuff here, Marc.
Well, I mean, I have to bring clinical here because I'm not.
No,
I feel like I'm the only one.
That's great. That's great. Future of the dental industry. So we talked a little bit about the future of your group, but where we see the consolidation, right? So we know it's continues. I mean, last year was crazy busy with consolidation. Any thoughts on in the next 4 or 5 years? I mean, do we see it continue? Do we see any different models kind of emerge? We've got a lot of these big DSOs that are now starting to buy other not so big, but still pretty big DSOs, that consolidation at the top. We see a lot of emerging groups, right? Dentist entrepreneurs that are out there that don't really are doing what you're doing, maybe a little bit differently. Just kind of curious what your thoughts are on what you see.
Well, so I mean, I think the sole. I mean, everyone says, the solo practitioner is always going to be around for now, because there's room for that level of customer service, and there's just room for them still, because they don't usually have big practices. They have small practices. They're not stepping on anybody's toes, and I think solo practitioners are always going to be around. In my mind, what will happen from the larger groups was probably the most interesting, and I think it's really on the medical side, which I think it's a slippery slope, because I think dentistry has been in a safe haven from an insurance standpoint, being on an island of its own, having its own dental codes. But with Pacific and some of the other groups venturing into having a integrated model between medical and dental, I wonder what happens. What are the repercussions down the road for that? I do think there is something to it. I think having that flow of medical patients into the same practice that your dental office is in is a no-brainer. It makes sense. But is it something necessarily that the industry is that good for dentists as a whole? I don't know. I really don't know. But I could see that being the future. And then if that really is something, then who knows? Maybe the hospital system actually gets involved in something like this. And they could probably put us all out of business if you think about it. Everyone's going through them one way or another. They have if someone could figure out how to do it, that could be vicious. But yeah, that integrated medical dental thing is something that I think is going to pick up a little bit, a lot of steam over the next 10, 20 years, without a question.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, it's certainly in its infancy now, and you've got different models. You got Pacific doing what they're doing. You have right, not necessarily in your area, but in New York, New Jersey, there's Pro Health Dental that's doing some things. And then of course you've got Kaiser Permanente on the West Coast as well. So a lot of different models out there. Nothing's really kind of worked itself out yet, but makes sense.
I think Aspen has something doing their med spa.
Right, they do. They've got they own the urgent care clinics well now, and so they're kind of venturing into different, using their support center for not just dental but the urgent care clinic and the aesthetic. I believe they have an aesthetic business as well. So, but
it doesn't make sense, right? You think someone goes to a hospital for a dental emergency, the hospitals are not equipped right now to handle them. Why? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. We talk about overwhelmed hospitals quite a bit, right? And they're going to bear for possible root canal, an issue, right? Probably pain. They're there for pain, most likely. they're not there for aesthetics for sure. So it's definitely interesting. So if there was a way that a hospital system could kind of get them out of the emergency room, so to speak, and have them go to the dental clinic, it would make sense.
Agreed.
All right, Dr. Marc Faber from Edge Dental Mgt, founder. Thanks for being on the Group Dentistry Now show. One thing I forgot to mention is that Dr. Faber's group, Edge Dental Mgt, was one of the 2020 winners of the Emerging Groups to Watch. We did an article. So if you want to read a little bit more about them, you can go to Group Dentistry Now and find out more. But great conversation. Appreciate you being on the show today. Really, really appreciate it. Some great insight, and I love the clinical touch. Thanks for kind of sticking with that, talking about the printing in-house, the milling. I really like it, and the fixer-up practices that you're buying, going from 2 operatories to 17. Crazy. I mean, you're the first I've heard that's done that. Somebody else probably has, but you're the first that I've heard that's done that.
And I'm definitely not the first. Trust me.
Well, good stuff. We appreciate you being on. We thank you for the contributions. Thanks everybody for listening in or viewing us on YouTube. Again, I'm Bill Newman with Group Dentistry Now. Until next time, this is the Group Dentistry Now show. Thanks for watching or listening.
The Group Dentistry Now show has listeners across North and South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. If you like our show, subscribe today and please tell your colleagues about us.